Okay, so welcome to the show, Pascal Murasira. Did I pronounce it good?
Very good.
Good. Okay, so welcome to Connect Africa. Welcome to the show. I will say a few words to introduce our guest today, Pascal Murasira. He is born and raised in Rwanda, but currently here in the Netherlands. He attended business school here at Wageningen University, where he became also a consultant at the university. But that's not it at all. It goes on. He works also with Pan-African farmers organizations. He advises African governments or agricultural organizations, NGOs, business companies, and he owns also a business in Rwanda, the first of its kind, which is a potato processing farm. And the other one is also, it's the first of the largest digital addressing as a service provider. You also co-manage several businesses, right? Businesses that sit here in Europe. Many things you are doing at the same time. So I kick off my first question by asking, why are not we as Africans seeing successful entrepreneurs in the West? You are, I mean, one of them, but really among the few. What is the major problem? Why are not we seeing many of you?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mahlet, and thank you for a generous introduction. Back to your question, was in Europe, in the West, in the diaspora, can also be in other continents who are doing amazing things, but sometimes we don't get an opportunity to talk about them. So they don't get enough exposure. And I would like to thank you for starting this show to make sure that such entrepreneurs, their stories, their activities, and whatever they are involved in can reach your audience, whether it's in the diaspora or within Africa itself. So thank you for that. Back to your question, I do think Africans in the diaspora, sometimes we want to spend most of our time thinking about how we can fit into our host communities, so our host countries, whether here in Europe or in any other continent. But we forget about what makes us unique. What makes us unique is the fact that we have a unique background, and we also have the opportunity to become a bridge between our host countries and our home countries. So whatever we do in any country where we are, in any continent where we are, let's just make sure that we don't where we come from, and also let's stay in touch with best from what we left home and the best of unique, special, that's as only Africans in the diaspora can really represent, implement, and bring its benefits to the world in general.
Interesting. I like that point that we often tend to forget that we are unique, that we can be a bridge between our home and here, and then usually, you know, struggle to fit in. I really like that. Take us to this journey, or your journey. I really love what I like about this show is always because it enables me, or it gives me the opportunity to hear stories, people's stories, and which actually people really can learn from it, because it has got that human touch that I can put myself in your shoe, you know. So take us to that journey. You actually come from the rural part of Rwanda, and you grew in this typically farmer household, and you are now in Wageningen. I mean, it's not to make a difference between it. That's also beautiful. Here is also beautiful, but like, how does it, what does it look like, your journeys? I'm just assuming that it's not really a smooth road. I mean, so from whatever you were facing, people can learn from it. Tell us your story.
But as you said, I was born in a farming household in rural Rwanda. So my family practiced agriculture, and my neighbors, they all practiced agriculture. I had an opportunity to go through school, but I did not want to do anything I did not want to have anything to do with agriculture when I was growing up, because I thought agriculture was a job for losers. But I can call it luck, because my mother was involved in the farmers' movements. So local cooperatives, at local level, village level, later at national level, but also at the continental level. And the fact that I could speak both English and French, and herself, she was Francophone. And most of her reports were coming in English. So I had to help her translate her documents that were coming in English to the language she could understand easily. So growing up, I was already immersed in the documentation, in the studies around agriculture and agriculture movement in Africa and developing countries in general. And of course, growing up in a family, in an agriculture family, I also knew about the realities of farmers. So talking about bridges, as we said earlier, being able to connect the realities that I knew and what I read in economic theories and like reports, I always saw that there was a disconnect. So what people were really experiencing in the field was different from what we could read in these reports from NGOs, from all these agencies that are trying to end poverty. So when I got a chance to go through school, after that, I got in contact with some researchers from Wageningen University. And we met by chance. And so they were in my hometown. I was working in a local hotel in one of my vacation, like holiday jobs. And I talked to one of the senior researchers, but when he introduced himself, I knew that I knew that name because I had read it in the reports before.
Wow. Okay.
So this was towards the end of 2009, and so we started talking. I was still in school. I was studying in Uganda back then. So it turned out that I actually had a very interesting conversation because I was not agreeing with everything he said, because most of the people that he worked with in Rwanda, because he was a European coming with money, everybody tended to nod and agree with him, everything he said.
Tell me about
it. For me,
yeah.
I knew that some of the things that like we thought in theory or like in these reports were considered as standard truth, actually not true. So we had a really interesting, engaging conversation, and he decided to connect me to some researchers who were coming from Wageningen. I started helping them do research in Rwanda in agriculture, and I got to realize also like there is actually a lot can be done to change the livelihoods of Rwandans and Africa in general through agriculture. So agriculture is not a job for losers. So that's the time I really realized that actually farmers, you can learn a lot from them. So farmers, they earn, let's say $1 per day or even less, but they still manage to send their children, such as ourselves and other children from Africa, to school. They manage to get to put some clothes on them. Some not always easily, but they do manage to do that. So there is a lot we can learn from farmers by understanding the dynamics, the economics, the perception of risk, all these business terms we hear today in the big corporate world. So that really led me to even getting further interested in agriculture, not only as a means of survival, but a means of potentially changing the fortunes of Africa in general. So I continued to work with the university, with researchers. Then from there, I started working with other Dutch NGOs, organizations. Around 2013, I started to come to the Netherlands for courses here at the university. And even going back, I continued to work in agriculture with Dutch partners, business partners, and researchers. At some point, I got an opportunity to work with a digital healthcare company. I decided to jump to go work in healthcare, not because I was bored with agriculture, but because of the digital part. So I had seen the opportunities that digital tools could bring in the agriculture in Africa. And I knew I could not go back to school to learn, how to build a tech company, which actually you cannot really learn from school. So working for one tech company was the best option I had. And I worked for this company. We were setting up the first end-to-end digital healthcare service in Africa, operating at national level. And that was my last job in Rwanda. Back then, I had also met my current wife, and my wife is Dutch.
Okay.
And when her project she was working on in Rwanda ended, we decided to move wherever she would get her next opportunity. And that opportunity was here in the Netherlands. And that's how I ended here.
What an interesting story. So the circle is full now. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me this, most Africans that live here, most of us, we live in a way that it's like hand to mouth, it's saving is very, for most of even the Dutch people here, to save is hard, but you can pay your bills, you can get everything that you want, house, car, gadgets in your house, everything you can get because of your, you can pay, there's this arrangement, you can pay monthly, but really to have an extra money is difficult, but of course it's different from a sense of hand-to-mouth living back home or in Africa and here. Now, you are now this successful entrepreneur or businessman. Why are we lacking that mentality, or I call it entrepreneurship mentality, from most of Africans? Even if they save what the maximum, most of them, what they can do is, or what they will do is they go back home, build a house or something. You see few of them are only engaged in business. Why are we lacking that? Is this because we didn't get it in school? Should we, in Africa, should we revise our academic curriculum and enforce entrepreneurship in it? What is it lacking? And is it, anyway, am I advocating for something that's not good? Like, how is entrepreneurship good for Africa? That's also a question.
Definitely entrepreneurship is good for anywhere. Not only in Africa, but also even for developed, the so-called developed countries. Well, we call Africa developing Africa and Latin America and some Asian countries, even some Eastern Europe countries, we call them developing countries. And we call the West a developed world, but it's not necessarily developed because there is always things also to improve.
Yeah.
But I do think the best way forward for Africa is through entrepreneurship. So we have tried heavy government, so that has led to crazy corruption and bureaucracies So relying on a government in Africa is not really reliable, as we have already experienced. We have tried to rely on aid. That's also not reliable.
Yeah.
That also has really significant weaknesses that we have seen throughout these past decades. But through entrepreneurship, people can create jobs, can create opportunities for themselves, but also the communities around them. And I think entrepreneurship is really the way to go. And in our education system, that part is still lacking.
Yeah.
Because most of the education system we have in Africa today was built, is inherited from the colonial times. And during the colonial times, what mattered for colonial powers was to educate their assistants, people that will help them govern, the countries, to govern their colonies. So that's not really, this education system is not built to be creative, to help you think beyond, like task A, B, C. Back to your question, I do think, as I said in the introduction, it is important for people to be true to themselves. I also see a lot of fellow Africans, especially here in Europe, where I spend most of my time, trying really hard to fit in here, to the point that they forget some of their biggest strengths. As I already said, the fact that they have that background, which is unique, and also the fact that in the host countries, they are able to acquire additional skills, so which are also valuable back home. Again, trying to compete in a job market here as an African is not easy. Even for citizens, for natives, by the way, let me not say citizens because most of us are already citizens. For natives, it's also becoming harder for them. So you cannot expect that process to be easy. You cannot expect to compete in that red ocean. But if you can really, like any business, like in entrepreneurship, just think about your perspectives from the entrepreneurial standpoint. What are you good at? What is your added value to society? It's not only about your family, which is crazy important. It's not only about the country back home or your family back home. It's also not just about the community that hosted you here or the country that hosted you. But what can you add to this world? What's the value you can add to this world? For example, yourself, you started this show to add value to Africans in the diaspora and hopefully provide also some lessons to Africans who are already, who are still in their home countries. But anything that helps you to add value to the world, you should pursue that. You should pursue that. And if that means entrepreneurship, if that means importing some artwork from your home country, or if it means exporting secondhand, whatever hardware equipment from here, or bringing in investors from here to your home country, just really try to find your edge, what makes you unique, and pursue that. It's not only an advice for Africans in the diaspora, but any human in this world. So we have to build on our strength, not on our weaknesses. Weaknesses will always be there, but try to focus most on your strength. That's what I can say.
No, well said, actually. Thank you very much for that. You actually engage in a lot of businesses and platforms. How do you make your balance actually, to attend all of them, and carrying out your responsibility, what is to do, what is expected from you. And also you can tell us briefly about your business, what you're doing maybe in Rwanda.
Yeah, in Rwanda, I mostly work with startups that want to raise capital or access technology from Europe. But that's also not only in Rwanda, also in several other countries. My family, as I said, is involved in agriculture, so I'm also involved in that as well. But also work with some government agencies and farmers organizations that, again, as I said, are trying to access foreign capital and technologies. In terms of what I do, like nowadays here in Europe, I also work with quite a number of European startups that, again, also interested in Africa, not only for Rwanda, but also like other countries, like your own home country of Ethiopia, other East African countries, but also in West Africa. And I mostly work in IT, so digital services, and in agriculture.
A lot. So how do you make that? How do you manage?
Yes, good question. So it's about priorities, because for example, I can give you examples. Like not all these organizations I work with, like pay my bills. There are some that, like pay the bills, and they tend to be the ones that are most financially endowed. And those, they take the first priority, of course. So that I dedicate more time to those. But also, it does not mean, for example, if I work with an agri-tech company from Europe, so they want to expand to Africa. But in Africa, I also work with a farm organization. So if I see that there is a match between those two, then I connect to them. But of course, I don't expect the farm organization to foot that bill. So I will send that bill to the Dutch, to the European company that want to access those farmers organizations. But on the other hand, I also have to advise that the farmers organization with 1 million, with 20, 30 million members, how can they streamline their internal processes so they can easily access, these kind of partnerships? So also, like if I'm working with an investor here in Europe that wants to invest in startups in Africa, it's my duty also to make sure that startup is also investable. So it's also my role to advise that startup so that it is investment ready, basically, because it makes the process of getting the investment from here to that startup more smooth. On the other hand, of course, as I already said, I do not expect that startup to pay, but I know that by helping them, to some extent, it makes my life also easier for other clients that are paying.
Interesting.
So prioritizing, but also like building an ecosystem, building a platform. And in a platform or an ecosystem, it's not like everybody pays. When you go to a local market, you have somebody who's coming with teff, and somebody who is buying, or like sesame in north of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
The farmer, there is also a buyer. So in that transaction, somebody will pay, whether they have to pay the marketplace or the commodity, the agriculture commodity exchange. Somebody will have to pay, but in most cases, it's the person who is investing that will pay that part, because they want to reduce their own risks in the marketplace. So I don't charge like both places at the same time, but it's my duty to make sure that transaction goes smooth. And the way to make that transaction go smooth is that by empowering both people to succeed, not only within during the transaction period, but also even after, what comes after.
Interesting. Wow.
Connect Africa.
In pursuit of startups, the talk on startups, nowadays we have a lot of startups in Ethiopia, in East Africa, also in Kenya, now that you mentioned Rwanda. I mean, in general, in Africa, it's like a time of, they are blooming and a lot of startups. And some of them really have a great idea. I mean, potentially, I can say that can really solve the problem of the country, their home country. But the problem is in accessing a fund. So they are constrained by that most of the time. So how do, the fund is usually just like, again, it's going to become like the AIDS, when you say that, okay, I have an idea that can potentially be millions of dollars, but then you need a startup who's going to give you that money to start. So what is your advice for these people? They have the best idea, but they don't know how to access the funds, or how to tap the funds.
So if you are a startup today, or you are an entrepreneur, you have a brilliant idea that you feel like you need investment to scale. By investment, I mean like a capital, outside capital. By the way, that's not always needed, but considering our entrepreneurship ecosystem, it might be a good idea to seek external investments, especially for scaling your operations before you become profitable. But I always advise entrepreneurs to do a due diligence, like to look at who is the entrepreneur, who can invest in my business, and what are they looking for? Because these investors, they also have money and they have to make money. So they have their requirements, they have their due diligence process, and they have their own way of measuring risks. Same way like an entrepreneur can quit his or her job to start a business, they are also taking a risk. So everybody's taking a risk. But as an entrepreneur, I always say it's your role to make sure that you are investable. So that means like you have a proper setup of your business. Maybe if the regulatory system in your country is not good, it's your role to work with other entrepreneurs, to advocate towards your lawmakers or your government to make sure that you have the laws in place that make investments smooth. And also make sure like you just don't throw your pitch deck to anyone. Look at like this guy that I want, or this investment that I want, this firm that I want to invest in my business. Are they really going to be helpful, or am I just going to get money and and I have just to return the money? So for entrepreneurs, it's also important to make sure that you get the investor who is not only bringing in money, but also bringing in a lot of other valuable inputs to make sure that you can grow, but also you can access the future investments. Because today, maybe you need $100,000, but tomorrow, if you start growing, maybe you need $1 million. Where's that $1 million going to come from? Maybe you need your current investor to help you with that future process. So in a summary, it is important for entrepreneurs to really do their own research. How can I make my startup investable? Do your research, make sure you know what investors are looking for, and approach them after you have really assessed them, because this is going to be like a marriage. You're going to be with them for a long time, and you don't want to have a wrong investor on board. And maybe to add on this, capital is there. Like we always say that, and people think it's like a fantasy, but money is not a problem. But the problem is to find the demand for that money. And that demand, that means like entrepreneurs be positioning themselves to be able to benefit from these investments.
But tell us, tell me in a simple word. For example, like I give you an example. Okay, let's say that I have an idea, which is really true, by the way, that I was halfway and so I didn't do it. I wanted to set up a packaging company, like a paper packaging company.
Yeah.
I was inspired when I arrived in the Netherlands. One thing that really struck me is how they use paper packaging or these renewable plastics, biodegradable plastics, everything renewable. Even the dustbins. There's a separate thing that for things that you can renew. That really blew my mind. And thinking back home, how much of plastic we are using and really poisoning our own environment, I said, I want to set up this back home. That was really my idea. And what I did was, after I finished my study, there was luckily, if you know, I don't know, the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, together with from the Dutch Foreign Ministry by abbreviation called PUM, like PUM.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly. They were working something for the Ghanaian and Ethiopian diasporas who wants to set up something. So, okay, I'm putting now my business out there in the public.
It's all about the execution.
In the view of that, I will benefit from your advice, and then others also can learn. Now, because of my own problem, like, okay, I was selected, I was in the 20s, but I didn't make it till the end. Okay, when we talk about, for example, this paper packaging thing, find, like, when you say do your research, is that investable, the demand, like, now give me an example with this one, okay, like, so that we understand.
Okay, that's from like an environmental standpoint, that's a really great idea. And again, like, don't worry about presenting your idea, because I'm sure there are many people out there with such idea, but it's all about execution. Even yourself, you decided to give up, but don't worry, you can always go back and work on it.
I always
so for me, if I was to work with you, by the way, which would not be free, but now that I'm in your interview, I'm in your show now, I will ask you, I will give you the first question is that profitable? Yes, it's good on paper, it's good for the environment, but if you do, let's say, like, you take your biodegradable paper and you put it in a supermarket, and somebody else comes with a plastic paper next to yours. If you were to look at prices, for example, because I know most of our African markets, they are very price sensitive. So if those packages, they're together and they do serve the same purpose, which is carrying goods or like groceries that a shopper is just bought, would an average Ethiopian pick your biodegradable, or they would pick the plastic one? That's the first, that's really the basic question. That's the very first question.
So you are saying, in other words, make it affordable?
No, I only asked you a question, like, would an average Ethiopian pick the biodegradable one, or like pick yours, or pick the plastic one next?
Oh, okay. If you're asking, as you said, many of us, I will put also myself in the community. So we are price sensitive, as you said. So I wouldn't even, people wouldn't even care which one is good for my environment or not. The cheaper ones I will take.
That's the very first question to ask yourself. I'm sure you did ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Maybe you had like a target market in place, which is like a niche, which is different from the mass. So if you have a niche, maybe you want to target people who are into like fair trade, who are into, you know, that movement of sustainability movement. Then you have to prove that actually there is a market for that, and you and your team are the right people to attack that market. So if you can prove that through a business plan or like a pitch deck, you know, it can also just be a pitch deck, then there you have a business case. But if you say that you want just to bring it to Ethiopia because you think it's a good idea, but you don't show where the the money will come from the customer, then that's really the first problem. But then you can go further, about how will you set up your business? Will it be best in the Netherlands? Will it be best in Ethiopia? How will you hire the talent to manage it? These are the things that come after, once you have proven that actually you have an investable business idea. Then the execution comes second. But indeed, I do think that was a great idea, by the way. For me talking, with the little information I have from your show, I think it was a good idea, but it needed to be geared towards a specific niche, because that's not a mass product.
But by the way,
even in Rwanda, where plastics are banned, you will still have to deal with the Chinese imported paper bags. It's not easy.
Rwanda is an example. In Africa, who actually really, how do you say, chased away those plastics out of market, right?
That is true. That is true. But you really need to be true to yourself to make sure that you can compete in the market.
But to be continued off the record, I didn't take it away from my mind, but really, maybe you will advise me something. At last, I will give you the opportunity to say, there are people who still who think that the only way, Africans I'm talking about, to make life better is by migrating to, this south to north migration. So, yeah. But whereas, you correct me if I am mistaken, most of the opportunities are even for them, for the native Westerners here, the opportunities are and the resources are back home in Africa. That's why they tell us that Africa is the future. So what do you advise for these young Africans who are day and night thinking of how they're going to get out of Ethiopia or Kenya or Rwanda and make it to Europe? What's your advice?
What I can say is that the opportunity is everywhere, and it always depends on your own circumstances.
Okay.
Definitely, even if if you're talking about moving without any purpose, without any real goal, that you're, without job, without any, without any opportunity that's waiting for you, it is not a good idea. Even if it means moving from your capital city, from Addis Ababa to, to one of your some rural areas of Ethiopia, or if it means moving from Oromia and coming to Addis, it's not necessarily a good idea. Even within the country, it's also the same for if you're crossing the country. Even the risk is greater. But really, what's important, I'm not saying Europe is bad, don't do this, don't do that. Of course, a lot of what we see on social media, what we have been conditioned to believe, also from our education system that we're talking about, to believe that Europe is heaven, which is sometimes, actually in most cases, not true. The same way, if you migrate to go to a slum in your capital city, is not necessarily a good idea. But really be honest with yourself. That's really an advice to the young people, not only in the diaspora, but also back home. Be honest with yourself. Where does your value to the world belong? Is it within your community? Is it within outside of your home borders, or within your national borders? So before you jump, because every jump is a risk, it's a risk you take. Even when you decide to jump from your home, your parents' home, to start your own household, that's a risk you're taking.
Exactly.
So just really think deeply about it and get to have a plan wherever you're going. So if you don't have a plan, you just think oh yeah, I've heard on radio that Europe is good. That's a really bad start. That's a really bad idea. Don't. Even if someone is following, listening to this show, watching your show, and thinking about moving to Europe, if you do not have a plan, please don't. And the plan means also like really checking at the laws and making sure like you do it legally. Otherwise, it's going to be hell. So be honest with yourself from where you're standing today and see where you can create value and start from there. Other things will build up, you know, as you move forward. Myself, when I was working with cassava farmers in Rwanda, I never thought I would be sitting here talking to you now.
Sure.
Yeah, they always say like it's easier to connect the dots looking backwards, but looking forward is really hard. Just think about what you can do now based on who you are today and what you have today. And then other things will build up from there.
Wow, interesting. Thank you very much for your time, Pascal. And I really hope that people will learn something from this video. And thank you for those of you who subscribed to this channel, and the one who didn't subscribe, be a family. And if you really like what we present to you, give it a like and spread the word by sharing it. And yeah, thank you for your time. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye bye.
Thanks.